Hello, everyone. And you should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So we're just going to give it a minute for others to enter the room. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for spending a part of your Thursday with us. We're going to get started. Welcome to the fifth section of our 2023 Fundamentals for Effective Environmental Commissions, or as I like to call it, EC Spring Training. We have designed this program here for you today. If you are a new EC member and are wondering what the heck does that mean, or if you are a seasoned volunteer environmental commissioner or planning board member, land use board member, we welcome you as well to our training today and look forward to speaking about land use. So before we begin today, I have a few notes about our program. This session is being recorded and it will be available afterwards. We will send the link for all of our webinar sessions this week to those who registered. So stay tuned for that email. Please use the Q&A section to ask questions throughout the presentations today, and we will address those either in real time or save them for our presenters after all the presentations are finished. And if we don't get to your question, or you have a question that relates to something entirely different, feel free to email us at info@anjac.org and we will get back to you shortly. I want to recognize the updates to ANJAC's mission that our Board of Trustees adopted just last fall. ANJAC's mission continues to be one that seeks to protect and restore our natural resources, and we've updated our language to reflect our commitment to ensuring equitable and healthy communities, and by advancing our mission through engagement in diverse and inclusive practices in all of our leadership, partnerships, education, and advocacy. Our priority continues to be to address your needs. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear what the challenges are in your municipality, and we will continue to align our programming and our support to address your needs. On the proactive end, we see that there are several issues that are affecting all of our municipalities in New Jersey, and we are aligning our programs and our resources and our policy agenda in Trenton to advance resilience to the climate crisis, as well as to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to advance environmental justice in local municipal planning, land use planning, as well as state policy, and to lift the voices of advocates for environmental justice who've been working on this issue for years and years and years. We're also working diligently to end plastic pollution. And as you know, we have the strongest Plastic Pollution Reduction Act in the country, thanks to all of the local support work that you have done and the local ordinances you passed. But we're not done yet. There were 2 microplastics bills that passed out of Senate Environment Committee last week and Assembly Environment and Solid Waste just this morning. So we're continuing to advance those initiatives, as well as working on banning incineration, otherwise known as pyrolysis, in environmental justice communities to try to keep the problems of air pollution from getting worse. So this is where you are today. This is the room that you're in. We're talking about land use, master planning, ordinances. We're going to do a little bit on zoning. These are the other sessions that happened earlier in the week. Again, the links will be sent out to you. And we invite you to join us this evening to talk about site plan review and stormwater management. If you have never reviewed a site plan application, that's the session for you. If you have reviewed a site plan application and thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what these squiggly lines mean. I don't know what all these numbers on the map mean. I don't know what the different colors mean. Then come join us and we'll try to break that down for you. We are also celebrating Women's History Month this March, and we are doing so by honoring some of the early leaders at ANJAC who were formative in creating what is now our 53-year-old legacy. 54-year-old legacy. We also honor Candy McKee Ashman, our founding executive director, through the Candy McKee Ashman Memorial Fund. And those funds are dedicated to our open space grant program, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. So if you are able, we do appreciate your donations and ask that you go to anjac.org/donate. You can restrict your funds to our open space program by indicating a donation directly to the Candace McKee Ashman Memorial Fund. And if your municipality has not yet renewed your membership for this year, please go ahead to anjac.org/memberships, and you can get information to do so there. If you don't know if you've renewed your membership yet for this year, you can go ahead and email us at info@anjac.org, and we're going to put that info@anjac.org and these other links in the chat, so you can go find them there. And because our mission is to serve you and to address the issues that you are facing and to align our resources with the issues that you're facing in your community, we want to know what you need from us. So as there was a movie line once that said, help me help you. And so go ahead and scan the QR code here. We'll also put the link in the chat and tell us what you need from us so that we can better serve you. And finally, the last of our introduction slides this morning or this afternoon, our open space stewardship grants for ECs are now open. This is a wonderful opportunity for environmental commissions to secure some funding to do restoration in your town on open space. You could do education, you can create community gardens, you can do trail maintenance. It's a very simple application. It is due on April 17th. You can go to our website under action alerts or just search our website for grants, and you can find that information. There's a volunteer match, which, as you know, is not a difficult match to get to over a year. And it's an opportunity for you to really secure some funds to grow your clout with your municipal officials, your governing body, to get some great work done in your community that's funded to bring people together. And there's some examples of the garden plantings, education, apiaries, bird habitat that have been implemented by ECs over the past 10 years of offering these open space grants. So with that, I want to thank you for being with us today. For those who are here in person and those who will be watching the recording, and encourage you to stay in touch with us. We know most of you know how to get in touch with us, but info@anjac.org is your best solution if you've got a question. And please follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and check out all of our recordings on YouTube at ANJAC Views. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our first speaker for today. We have Mr. Ed DeFilio here with us. Ed is the treasurer of ANJAC's board, so he's a little bit of an ANJAC insider. Ed has a wealth of experience working with environmental commissions, serving on an environmental commission in Ocean Township, Monmouth County. Do I have that right, Ed? Okay. Ed and I have worked together for years on providing support to municipalities on master planning, ordinances, zoning. So I will leave it at that. And Ed, if there's anything else you would like to add to the introduction and tell us about yourself, we would love to hear it. But I'm going to turn it over to you. He's working on his technology right now. There we go.
Yes, hold on. I'm trying to share my screen so you can see my slides.
Okay.
Thank you for the introduction, Jen. And if you will all bear with me for 1 second so you can see the slides.
Have we given you permission? Have we allowed you to share your screen?
I believe so.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, hold on. Maybe not.
Liz, can you make Ed a co-host so he can share his screen?
I
I
think I
believe
am. I think this is totally on my end. I'm so sorry. If you bear with me for
Okay.
1 second.
I'm going to read one of the questions we've got in the Q&A and talk about that for a minute while you work it out, Ed. And if you let us know if you need to go away and come back, or if you need other tech assistance. But the question from Lois is, with increasing awareness of the environmental and health issues associated with microplastics, why do counties and municipalities continue to fund artificial turf fields? I think that's a great question. And we had an article in a recent ANJAC report. I'm not sure if it was the spring issue, maybe the staff can jump in and help me, or if it was the winter issue before that, where we talked about turf versus what do we call it? Real grass, I guess. And there are pros and cons to both. Turf is more durable. Real grass, if you will, requires more maintenance, often more fertilizer, more watering, more care. And so, yeah, certainly there are pros and cons with both. When we're talking about microplastics, we're really looking at the breakdown of trash that has gotten into our oceans and rivers. But we'll take a look again, and I'll look at artificial turf fields and see if there are any academic studies that talk about microplastic or degradation of the turf fields. So that's a good question. All right, Ed, it looks like we're seeing your screen now, so I'm gonna turn it over to you.
All right, you can see me, you can hear me. Great.
I can see you, I can hear you. I got your slides. We're all
Fantastic. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. So as Jen said, my name is Ed DeFilia. I am today wearing my ANJAC hat, and I am not speaking on behalf of any other organization. However, I am the chair of the Township of Ocean Environmental Commission, and I am its Class 2 Planning Board member, which means that I am the Environmental Commission's representative to the Planning Board, which is important, and I'll explain why in a few slides. So Jen did all the introductions, so we're just going to dive right into understanding municipal master plans. I want to set expectations for the session today. I can promise you two things. The first is you will not be an expert in master plans by the time this session is over. Master plans are incredibly large, detailed documents that require an entire team of professionals to put together. What I can also promise you, though, is that you will leave this session knowing more about master plans than 95% of your fellow New Jerseyans. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about this today. So let's dive right in. So, municipal land use law in New Jersey allows towns the right to govern development. Each town has many documents and regulations that govern a municipality's development. In a perfect world, land use planning should begin with environmental resource inventory, which you will see in the upper left of your screen. An environmental resource inventory captures the current situation of what your town's environment is, where your water is, where your steep slopes are. We'll get into that in a little bit more in a few slides. The environmental resource inventory is used to inform the master plan, which is what we're here to talk about today. The master plan is the vision for your town, how you want to develop it, what it's going to look like, where are you going to put your housing, where are you going to put your stores. Now, in New Jersey, this is a little bit different because most of our towns have been around for a long time. We're one of the 13 original colonies. New Jersey's been developed for centuries. So this isn't the same as a town that is growing out west in some place that's new. So a lot of the master plan is talking about our existing resources and how to improve them and how to change them. After the master plan, we go into our zoning laws, our zoning ordinance that Jen is going to talk about in greater detail in a little bit, but it talks about the densities and where we're putting our residential. The land use regulations, after we have our zoning laws, our land use regulations get into two specific areas, our design and protective rules. One is our ordinance requirements for each zone, such as how big are the lots in your residential areas? What are the setbacks? How much parking do you need? Are you going to do a cluster development, or are you going to let large lots just kind of proliferate everywhere? And how much impervious cover are you allowing in each of those different areas? And then you also have general ordinances for all your zones, such as your stormwater, your stream corridors, things like that. So, like I said, the master plan is the community's vision for the future. Will new development have a native tree planting requirement? Is it going to have the cluster development we mentioned? Is it going to be located near existing mass transit, or is it going to be far away from amenities? These are the types of things that the master plan is considering. It's the vision for your community, setting the framework for local land use. Your ERI should be used for planning and zoning as it maps where the steep slopes are, where the streams are. And it ties into the master plan because as you're looking to build houses, where do you want to build those houses? It guides local planning process, including protecting those natural resources, not just identifying, but protecting them as well. It also looks at where are you going to put your schools? Where are you going to put your parks? How are you going to develop your economy in a way that balances all of the needs of the town, the need for open space to protect natural resources, but also the needs for folks to have jobs that they might be able to get to without commuting halfway across the state, like a certain presenter you might know is doing. The master plan itself is adopted by the planning board. It is a planning board document. This is not a document that your mayor and council are working on. It's not one for the zoning board. This is owned and created by your planning board with community input. And I want to highlight that point, with community input. It guides the future land use in the town. It establishes goals and policies. It doesn't just talk about how you want to see the town developed. It talks about how are you going to get there. A master plan incorporates a number of existing features. It talks about what does the town look like today. And it also says what we want the town to look like tomorrow, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. And it lays out policies and goals to get there. It is not specific the way the zoning ordinance is. It is broad brush strokes. It is very high level. The master plan isn't going to tell you that you can only have 70 only. It doesn't tell you have up to 70% impervious cover in a zone, but it will tell you that one of the goals is to reduce impervious cover in the town, to address flooding. Master plans must be re-examined every 10 years, more frequently as needed. An environmental commission should be involved in the master planning so that the town's natural resources are protected. And I want to go back to what I said, with community input. As members of the environmental commission, you're community members. You should be an active participant in this process. Now, when I introduced myself, I mentioned that I am the Class 2 member of the planning board. In New Jersey, if you have an established environmental commission, and Liz or Jen, please jump in the comments and correct me if I misspeak here. If you have an environmental commission, you may have a Class 2 member sit on your planning board, which is the environmental commission's liaison, for lack of a better descriptor, to the plan. Thanks, Jen. To the planning board, which means that your environmental commission has a seat at the table. Not only can all the members attend the public process portion of it, where they have a hearing and you can attend, but your Class 2 member has an active say on the dais with the rest of the planning board as to how the master plan is developed. All right. So what needs to go into this master plan? We've touched on a few things, but there's actually not a lot that has to go into the master plan. The requirements are a statement of purpose. What are you doing in your town? Why are you having a master plan? What's going on? How it relates to other plans, like your stormwater plan, for instance, how it relates to your, if you have a, I'm blanking on my terms right now. If you have other plans like a bike and pedestrian plan, for instance, how it relates to that. It has a land use element, which is what sets your zoning standard. How are you going to use the land, where your house is going, your businesses, your industry, etc. It has a housing element, which Jenna is going to cover a little bit more when we talk about housing. And it has a brand new requirement for a climate hazard assessment. This is brand new. Towns are still figuring it out. I know that my town is still figuring it out. And then there's other optional elements that are important to environmental commissions. There's the conservation element, talking about where and how are we going to preserve open space and natural resources, which again, goes back to the need to have an environmental resource inventory, so you know what and where you want to protect. The open space and recreation plan element, which also discusses how we're going to use the open spaces. Are we going to have active recreation fields like soccer fields or ball fields? Are we going to only have passive recreation such as trails? Or are we just going to have forest that is preserved as a natural habitat? And then that goes back to the great question about the turf field. So that was a good question. Green buildings and sustainability planning, farmland preservation. And there's two other elements. There's a long list of elements, and I encourage everyone to look at some of the other materials Anjak has created that list all of these. But there's two that I want to highlight in particular. The circulation element talks about how we get from point A to point B in our towns and cities. Are we going to walk there? Are we going to drive there? Are we going to take a train there? Are we going to take a bus there? As we're talking about changing our land use habits to have more smart growth, to create places where we can live, work, and play, and we don't need a car to get there, the circulation element becomes more important. Many, and this is anecdotal, someone I'm sure can fact check this for me, but many master plans continue to be very car-centric, and especially in our suburbs, that mass transit and pedestrian considerations are at best mentioned, if they're mentioned at all. The other one that I want to mention is the utility services plan. The utility services plan is often overlooked. It talks about where your water supply is coming from. It talks about how you treat your sewage, your electric lines, your telecommunications. As we move towards more decarbonization, we need to be taking closer looks at our utility services plans, because most utility services plans say, we have adequate capacity to meet our needs for water. We have adequate capacity to meet our needs for sewage. And maybe they don't, but most, if not all, that I've ever looked at say, oh, we have adequate capacity to meet our electrical need. And I happen to know, looking at the list of attendees, there's a few electrical engineers on here who I am sure are nodding, or rather shaking their heads at home. No, it's not. So it's one of the areas to take a closer look at, to make sure that as more houses remove fossil fuels from their homes, that we have enough electrical capacity to make sure that we meet the needs. So a little bit more. New Jersey has delegated land use powers to municipalities. The municipal land use law covers all of our master plans, our zoning, the Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment, their powers and duties, and land use ordinances. Now, the municipal land use law is not a fun read. That's not something I recommend taking to the beach with you on a summer day, but it's what gives planning boards their power to create the master plans. And I think it's important to understand some of the pieces that are in it. Ooh. So what can environmental commissions do to help move this process along? First is the easiest, the low-hanging fruit is review the conservation element plan during the master plan re-examination. The conservation element, as I said, helps determine what our natural resources that need to be preserved are and creates a plan to do them. And also, and I know that I sound like I'm just repeating myself, but it is a point that needs to be repeated over and over again. The environmental resource inventory, occasionally called the natural resources inventory, is really critical in helping lay the groundwork for identifying and quantifying and explaining what the natural resources in your town are. And then you can build your ordinances around them. But going in and trying to create ordinances, say, well, we think this, or we kind of feel that maybe there's some stuff over there that's important. No, just no. It's really important to have that groundwork foundation so that you know what you're talking about. So sorry, my screen just froze. We want to consider the natural conditions, including topography, soil conditions, water supply, drainage, floodplain areas, marshes, and woodlands. I recently came across an application to give an example of why this is important. They wanted to build a memory care center, which is important for those of you who have know people suffering from memory care issues. You know how important that care is. But they wanted to build this giant building on top of a more or less sand mountain. And the developer was all set to go for it, but they hadn't read our environmental resource inventory. They didn't know that they would have to excavate something like 10,000 truckloads of sand to be able to build it. Had they looked at the environmental resource inventory and said, oh, maybe that's not a good idea, they could have saved themselves a lot of headaches. But it also goes to show that the municipalities and you as environmental commissioners need to know what your resources are. So when someone comes to the town and says, I want to build XYZ here in town, that you can say, hey, that's great, but maybe not build it in a place that has poor soil conditions for that, or maybe not build it in the floodplain, which is always good. And how are we going to make sure that this isn't impacting adjacent environmentally sensitive areas, right? It's not necessarily always how one building on one lot is going to impact that lot, but what's happening on the lots next to it? What's going on in the area around that proposed development? So it also shows the existing and proposed land use and describes the population development intensity as well as natural conditions of the town. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm a map geek. I love looking at maps, and I love looking at the types of maps that go into an ERI. Where are the streams? Where are the densest parts of your tree canopy? But most people don't do that, which I was always shocked to learn. Most people don't really have a sense of what their town is beyond what they drive. So looking at these maps of different layers of how you can view your town, where's your residential, where are your trees, where are your roads, separate from everything else, gives you an entirely different perspective of the town. And the environmental resource inventory and the way that it can present these different layers of data so that you have a better sense of each individual element of your town's natural resources and how they combine together to make your town what it is, helps you as environmental commissioners understand how all of these things intersect with one another. Okay, so now there's a few other requirements. There's the smart growth requirement, which we touched on a little bit. It is consider the potential locations for the installation of electric vehicle charging stations, which is a fun state law now. I don't know how many of you are also on planning boards, but now I believe it's the smart ready vehicle charging infrastructure is always fun because it's still not making its way into a lot of plans that come before planning boards. So it's always fun to remind them of that. But they also have to, master plans now need storm resiliency with respect to energy supply, flood-prone areas, and environmental infrastructure, environmental sustainability. Now, the really cool, exciting thing, and I'm sure that it's giving headaches to planners all over the state, and I will buy them all the Tylenol they need to just get through it and do this right, is the requirement for a climate change-related hazard vulnerability assessment. This is a brand new law started in 2021, and I have in front of me the actual requirements for this. And if you will indulge me for just a moment, and I don't normally like to read legalese in any of these presentations, but I think it's really important that these new plans need to analyze current and future threats to and vulnerabilities of the municipality associated with climate change related natural hazards, including, but not limited to, increased temperatures, drought, flooding, hurricanes, and sea level rise. Include a build-out analysis of future residential, commercial, industrial, and other development in the municipality, and an assessment of the threats and vulnerabilities identified in the subparagraph related to that development. Identify critical facilities, utilities, roadways, and other infrastructure that is necessary for evacuation purposes and for sustaining quality of life during a natural disaster to be maintained at all times in an operational state. Analyze the potential impact of natural hazards on relevant components and elements of the master plan. Provide strategies and design standards that may be implemented to reduce or avoid risks associated with natural hazards. Include a specific policy statement on the consistency, coordination, and integration of climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment with any existing proposed natural hazard mitigation plan, floodplain management plan, etc., and rely on the most recent natural hazard projections and best available science provided by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Now, if that all sounded like a lot to you, that's because it is, and it should be. We learned the hard way and continue to learn the hard way from our natural disasters that we have not taken into account climate change in how we are building our cities. Places that have never flooded before are flooding now. They flooded in Sandy, they flooded in Irene, they flooded in nor'easters. We need to take this seriously, and our planning needs to reflect that. We cannot continue to pretend that climate change isn't affecting our day-to-day lives. I can tell you in my own municipality that we have more flooding issues now than we did a decade ago because we're getting more intense rainstorms. We're getting more overwhelmed stormwater management features. It's a reality, and now the state of New Jersey has recognized that and is requiring us to plan for it. A few other elements to touch on, and I think I touched on a couple of these earlier, are open space and recreation plans is another optional element of your master plan. Open space and recreation plan talks about, hey, what are we going to do with our open space? Are we going to preserve it? Are we going to have active recreation, passive recreation? Historic preservation plans. Some municipalities have areas of town or their whole town, depending on where you are, that have a lot of historic significance, and the Department of Environmental Protection recognizes that and allows towns to create historic preservation plans. Flood management and stormwater management plans. I don't think I need to tell anyone on this call how important both of those things are. And there's a whole host of other elements out there. Again, the list is extensive, including economic plans. There's a recycling plan element that you can have in there if you want. There's options. Again, the master plan is for you to decide how you want your town to develop and what you want it to look like. And there's a lot of latitude given to municipalities in their master plans to be able to do that. And I covered this earlier, but we do allow for the protection of open spaces as a purpose in our master plan. And for those of you who have limited amounts of open spaces left to preserve, I think you can appreciate how important that is. And then just to recap briefly, you take your environmental information, your environmental resource inventory that highlights all of your natural features, and you turn that into your master plan, which is your broad stroke vision for what you want your town to look like. Then you take that broad stroke vision and you turn it into your zoning plan, which is specifically how are we going to develop it. That's going from, hey, this part of town might be nice for houses, to, hey, we should build houses over here, to, this is what your house is going to have to conform to. It's going to have a setback. It's going to be limited to so many square feet, etc. And then you build your specific ordinances off of the zoning. And after that, then you can get into your thematic plans, such as your open space and recreation plan, circulation element, utilities, all of that stuff. And with that, I will pause. I think I get myself to my 20 minutes. And yeah, if you have questions, the contact info is at the bottom. I will be sticking around to answer any other questions you might have at the end of that. And without anything else to say, I'm going to turn it back over to Jen.
Thanks, Ed. That was great. Really appreciate it. I'm going to pick up on the zoning theme that you were talking about, and then we'll take a few questions and answers afterwards. So if you could stop sharing your screen, that will enable me to be able to share mine. There we go. All right. Okay, thank you again, everyone, for being with us here on a Thursday afternoon. And I want to speak a little bit about zoning. So Ed walked us through master planning and the master plan elements. Your master plan is really your hope, your vision, your dream for what you want your municipality to be, how you want to change as time moves forward. The real meat or the teeth of the policies of the master plan come in land use and zoning. And so that's where you have your codes and your provisions. And I want to talk a little bit today about what is zoning, who's in charge, what are the stakes, and then when, why, and how can we change zoning? I am not a planner. And so I come to you today speaking as someone who has been involved in municipal government, has served on multiple boards, has helped, oh, I don't even want to say it, but it might be in the hundreds of municipalities at this point, with various zones, reviewing site plan applications for about 20 plus years, we'll say. I am not a planner. I'm not a certified planner. So if you want to talk about the particulars of the thought process behind these different types of zoning, you have to talk to a planner and somebody who knows more than I do. I come to you today as ANJAC's executive director with all of that experience. I do currently serve on a planning board, but I am not speaking as a planning board member for my municipality today. But the general idea behind zoning is it's what do you want and where do you want to put it? And how dense do you want it to be? That's the idea behind zoning. And so I wanted to ask, this is a little nod for my Golden Girl fans out there. I wanted to ask you to think about a time when you have been in a contentious municipal meeting. And I know that we've got 54 people on. I would bet that 50 of the 54 people have been in a contentious municipal meeting. It's late, people are tired, they have reviewed plan upon plan. Sometimes these meetings go on for weeks or months. I've seen them at times go on for a year or more, talking about the same application. And there are often a number of audience members who don't like the plan that's at hand, the idea of whatever development is coming forward. And then there are board members with limited ability sitting on the dais. So I have been on both sides of that issue. And as someone sitting in the audience who knows that plan X, Y, or Z is bad for water quality, bad for flooding, bad for community character, bad for traffic, bad for pollution of any kind, those that would impair water quality or would impact already overburdened communities. It's really frustrating. As a planning board member sitting behind the dais, and I've served on a planning board for a few different municipalities, my only job as a planning board member, and the only job of any planning board member or land use board member, is to determine if the application at hand meets the current municipal codes. Does it meet the zoning? Does it meet the ordinances? If it does, I am compelled to vote yes for it. If I vote no for it and the application fails, it will go to court and it will be overturned and the development will proceed anyway. So my only job, the only job of land use board members and planning board members, is to determine if the application complies with local zoning and local land use ordinances. If I hate it, if I think it's ugly, if I think it's bad for a municipality, I have to vote for it anyway, if it meets local code. So really, really frustrating. Now, if you're violating our stormwater management ordinance, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight, then I can do something about it. But if you're not, I'm stuck. So who actually is in charge? I've been at many a meeting where members of the public are upset at an application at hand and they want to change the zoning. You can't do that. Once an application has been deemed complete, so once the architectural plans, the engineering plans, the traffic studies for a development have all been submitted and deemed what's called administratively complete, then the clock is closed, or the clock stops, and we have what's called the time of application rule that is triggered. The time of application rule means that all of the zoning provisions, all the land use ordinance provisions that were in place at the time the application was deemed complete are frozen in time. It doesn't matter if they're changed from this point moving forward. You're looking at this application given the land use ordinances that are on the books at the time the application is deemed complete. If you want to change zoning and you want to change the type and density of what kind of applications your municipality is courting for development, because that's what's happened, When you have space that's not developed and not preserved, you're courting it for development unless you're actively working to preserve it. You need to change the zoning before an application is proposed. And that is the sole responsibility of your governing body. Whether you have a council or a committee, whether you have a strong mayor or a mayor that's elected from within your committee, it's the responsibility of the governing body, not the land use board, to change zoning, to change land use ordinances. Now, there are differences between, I keep saying planning board, land use board, zoning board. Traditionally, there's a planning board, and that sees applications that largely conform with existing zoning and existing land use ordinances. There's also a zoning board. Zoning boards see applications for big variances. The mother of all zoning variances being the D variance, and this requires a supermajority of the zoning board, not a simple majority. So if you have a 5-member zoning board, you need 4 members to vote for a D variance. 3 won't do it, it will fail. And this means that an application wants to come in and doesn't want to conform with what the zoning is saying. These applications or these requests for variances should be rare. They should be for the public good. So think about an extension of a hospital and the zone does not permit it, and they're looking to add on to, say, their research facility or their emergency department. They should be rare and they should be for the public good. They are not always, unfortunately. So I want to talk a little bit today. I could talk about zoning and planning all day long, but I know we don't have that kind of time. These are common questions that we get at ANJAC, and that we know a lot of organizations that work with environmental commissions and governing bodies get applications and then questions about both affordable housing and about warehouses. And we know both can be a stress on a community. These things are not the same. We know that they can trigger some of the same anxiety and some of the same environmental stresses, but they are not the same. Why? Because municipalities have a moral, ethical, and legal obligation to provide affordable housing to residents. That is not the case with warehouses. There are no moral, ethical, and legal obligations to provide space for warehouses. When we're talking about affordable housing, and we're going to look at the numbers regarding housing soon, we're talking about providing housing for people who work in nonprofits. You're talking about providing housing for people who work in hospitals, for teachers. It is expensive to live in this state. And so even affordable housing is not cheap housing. It's not inexpensive housing. And so we have had a legacy of Mount Laurel COA, Coalition on Affordable Housing rules in New Jersey for decades now. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to give an accurate history of those details. But I will say that there have been several rounds of COA rules, Coalition on Affordable Housing, and they have been challenged and challenged and challenged in court time and time again. And where we sit right now is that all municipalities must have their affordable housing plans court approved. So my understanding is that we don't have a regular process of rules. The system has broken down with such inefficiency and legality that now we're at the point where each municipality has to go to court to get in a negotiation process to get their court approved affordable housing obligation number certified. And then that's your number. That number can change moving forward depending on what else your municipality does, what kind of development you approve. One of the factors influencing how many affordable housing units your municipality has an obligation to build includes how many facilities you are building and how many jobs you're creating. So think if you're creating more jobs via warehouses, you might have more obligations regarding affordable housing. One of the things I found shocking in doing some research on affordable housing is that approximately 1/3 of municipalities, we have 564 municipalities by our last count in New Jersey. So approximately 1/3 completely failed to do any planning for affordable housing. They just say, we're not doing it. Hands up, not doing it. Nope. We're going to duck. Can't get me. Nope. And eventually you get caught. And what you get caught in is called a builder's remedy. So if a municipality abdicates their responsibility to plan for affordable housing, they abdicate their moral, ethical, and legal obligations to provide housing to their residents who are of lower income, then they are subject to the builder doing it for them. And when a builder does it for you, that means you have 4 market rate homes for every affordable unit. So this is where we see environmental commissions with their heads starting to explode when they come to us and they see these massive townhome complexes, these massive apartment complexes coming forward. And there are very few affordable housing units included with the development. That's because it's subject to a builder's remedy. Now, I do want to say the builder will go to court, the builder will get a court order, and the court order will say, yep, municipality X, Y, and Z, you failed to come and get a court-approved plan for your affordable housing. You failed to proactively provide housing for your residents of lower income. And so therefore the builder's going to do it for you, and you are required to approve a plan that says yes to X number of units. This often pushes municipalities into approving plans in areas that they would never approve them in the first place. And they are in floodplain areas. They're often butt up against wetlands. They're often in forest areas. And this is why EC's heads start to explode, because they see the flooding impacts. They see the water quality impacts, the flooding impacts for the environment, but also the flooding impacts for the affordable units. I often see the affordable units are wedged closest to the flooding areas. So then we're talking about making environmental justice matters even worse, because you're putting people who are least capable of financially recovering from a flood in the most vulnerable spot. So the bottom line here is that there is nothing that requires a municipality to waive environmental protections for for affordable housing. There's nothing that says a municipality has to waive environmental protections for affordable housing. They get backed into a corner because they have failed to do their proactive planning. And then they lack the resources to be creative and come up with viable solutions. So if you're worried about massive applications for housing coming to your municipality and they include a small amount of affordable housing, because you're subject to a builder's remedy, you've got to get in front of it. You've got to ask your municipality, do they have a court certified plan for affordable housing, and how are they working to meet their affordable housing obligation? Most municipalities are so far behind in meeting their affordable housing obligations because the rules were in limbo for so many years, and they simply said, we're going to wait and see. The affordable housing rental rates, or the limits per month, are laid out here for Essex County. I just picked Essex because I was able to find a nice graphic that was already finished for me. These rates are set per county. So each of the 21 counties have a different rate, and they're calculated based on the average median income. And low income means 80% of the average median income for your county. And you can see that in this 80% line, affordable housing does not mean inexpensive. These are still significant rent prices. And so these people who are coming into these affordable homes deserve, regardless of what they're paying, they deserve to be in areas that are protected from flood, that have healthy water, that have healthy air to breathe. And that's the municipality's responsibility to do proactive planning. So if you're not going to be subject to a builder's remedy to meet your affordable housing obligation, how the heck do you do it? Well, there are options, and ANJAC is not partnered with any of these organizations. We don't necessarily endorse these organizations, but they are good examples of organizations who have done work throughout New Jersey to meet affordable housing obligations. So municipalities can partner with other nonprofits and community development groups that seek to provide housing for seniors, for veterans, for people with disabilities. And so there are options, but again, it requires you to be proactive. It requires you to get out in front. And here's a little secret. When you are running for municipal office and you want to be an elected official, you don't get any training in any of this. So you know what you know coming in. And if this isn't what you know, then somebody has to bring it to you. And so that's why we're happy to work with environmental commissions and really arm you with the resources you need to be able to bring to your elected officials, because they might simply have no idea about the municipality's affordable housing obligation. And all of a sudden they're sitting with a lawsuit that says you have to provide this many units for a builder's remedy because your municipality failed to do planning proactively. Now I want to, whoops, oh, you saw my secret slide at the end. I want to talk a little bit about one of the other requests that we get often. And I know I'm going a little long on time, but I think it's important for us to talk about affordable housing and why you're seeing the applications you're seeing. Related only in that it's one of the top questions we get at ANJAC is, oh my God, there's a warehouse. How do I stop it? And why are we seeing so many warehouse applications? And we are seeing them from Warren County all the way down to Gloucester and Burlington County, and probably even further south than that. And we're seeing this because the Port of New York and New Jersey is now the busiest port terminal in the country. We bring in more shipping containers, more fossil fuel ships than the Port of LA, which ranked #1 for a very long time, bringing in materials from Asia. Now, these are huge ships. This is not a boat. These are ginormous. If you've ever been up in the North Jersey, New York region, you can attest to the enormity of these ships. This is everything that is probably within arm's reach of me right now on my desk has come in on a shipping container at some point in time. And giving the volume of materials that are coming into that port, there then needs to be a distribution network. New Jersey has a lot of highways, and there are a lot of states east of the Mississippi that want to receive the goods that are coming in through our terminal. So that creates the pressing need for warehouses connected in some proximity to these highways, ideally, that we are then building to distribute these goods. So that's why this is happening right now. There is guidance right now from the Office of Planning and Advocacy, and the link is here. And again, these slides will be sent out. You could just Google New Jersey guidance on warehousing, and this will pop up for you. The end of the matter here is the same with affordable housing. You need to proactively plan. If you have areas in your municipality where it makes sense to have warehousing, then zone them for warehousing. If you've got good connections to good highway, if they are poor agricultural soil, if they're not near a residential area, go ahead and zone for it. But the idea here is that with the increasing pressure for warehouses, if you have a simple commercial zone that sits on top of an agricultural zone, and all agricultural zones have a secondary zone on them, they're either residential, commercial, they're rarely industrial. And a farmer decides, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to preserve my land because the preservation prices just can't compete with what the warehousing businesses are willing to pay. And my kids don't want to do this anymore, so I'm done. I'm going to sell. Then you very well could get a warehouse. I have seen warehouses proposed on small 2-lane county roads. I have seen them proposed along a historic single-lane bridge. And our traffic is in such disrepair, and our roads are in such disrepair in some places in New Jersey, that once a road is already failing, it will continue to fail according to traffic studies because of a warehouse. So there's no reason, there's no legal incentive for a planning board to vote it down. There are municipalities, Franklin Township, Somerset is one that comes to mind, that have specifically excluded areas of their towns for warehouses by zoning. And we can get you that information if you're interested in it. But again, the important thing here is to get out in front. If you are not in front of planning for affordable housing, if you're not in front for planning for warehouses, where you want them, where you don't want them, then it's going to happen. That 50-page document that is advice and guidance for municipalities on warehouses really says you have the power. You've had it all along. It comes in zoning, it comes in your land use ordinance. So if you don't want this, then get ahead of it. Otherwise, once the application comes in and once it's deemed complete, all of your rules are frozen in time, and the planning board or zoning board has to hear that application given the current zoning and land use ordinances on the books. So that's what I have for you today. I know I went over in my time, but I want to see if we've got any questions, either for Ed or myself, that we can help provide additional clarity on master planning, land uses, or ordinances. All right, let's see. So do I have, did I lose everybody? Have I, oh, there we go.
No,
I see Sheila.
Yes.
I was like, oh no, I wasn't looking at my phone. Was I talking to myself for the last 20 minutes?
Hildy had asked, what specific expertise do you recommend for the EC representative to have that's going to serve on the planning board?
Oh, that's a good question. I would recommend that you come to all of the ANJAC fundamentals for effective environmental commissions for training. I would also recommend that you go to the NJPO, the New Jersey Planning Officials Training, because it's required for you to attend that within the first 18 months of your appointment. I will say the last time I went through it, they're not going through and reviewing site plan applications and stormwater management. So come to the ANJAC trainings. We get a little deeper. The NJPO planning or training is great, but they don't do the in-depth site plan and stormwater analysis training that we do. So I would say tune into those trainings, and get on our listserv, and we send out trainings via the ANJAC news that comes out twice a month, anjacnews.org. I think we have anjacnews.com as well. And you'll see other trainings that our colleague nonprofits put out, from the Watershed Institute, New Jersey Future, and others. Ed, do you have any? You serve on ECM planning board.
I do. As far as skills, both are volunteer boards, so it would be great if you had a planner or a land use expert. But if you are just a volunteer who cares and is serving on the planning board as your EC rep, my only recommendation, other than everything Jen just said, is read your master plan. And if you read your town's master plan, you're probably one of 15 people in your town who's done it.
Good point.
Terrific.
Are there other
Thank you.
questions?
Yep. Somebody is asking about, a lot of municipalities are fully developed. At what point does the master plan need to be fully about neighborhood and open space preservation rather than growth?
That's a good question. I'll say the only county in our in New Jersey that's really considered built out at this point is Hudson County. Otherwise, the majority of municipalities have some room for continued development. But the game is rapidly shifting towards redevelopment and looking at what happens. And the pandemic did a doozy on a number of developments that were either pending or shopping complexes. We see a lot of outdoor shopping complexes. We used to call them outdoor malls. We see indoor malls that are not as full anymore and that are shutting down. So it's not so much once you reach every square inch is either preserved or has something built on it, game over. But you're thinking about the transition and the redevelopment as well. And that really depends on, I would say, the percent of coverage that you have in your municipality. What do you think, Ed?
Well, I also think it depends on your municipality in general. If you have a municipality that has a lot of highway frontage, strip malls, and retail that has been suffering even before the pandemic, then a lot of it's going to be redevelopment anyways, because they're highly accessible areas that are being underused. And yes, there's still a lot of little parcels here and there that can get built out, but I think that the redevelopment is super critical right now to look at in the master plans. And I think there's we'll see more of it. And as we see more of it, I would encourage you all to just be creative in how you envision it. Just because you had a strip mall with a handful of retail outlets and some restaurants there for the last 50 years doesn't mean it has to always be that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good point.
Terrific. Davina has a question that I believe we answered, but maybe a little more detail. How often does the master plan need to be revised or updated?
Ed?
It's every 10 years, but you should do more. You can do master plan re-examination reports. You can do them whenever you feel that they're necessary. The law is every 10 years, but 10 years is a long time to go without any updates. You know, even looking at how municipalities have changed, as Jen just alluded to, with the pandemic and the realities facing retail versus how many folks are ordering things online and having them delivered. So, you know, 10 years is the absolute minimum. And I would say look at them as often as you feel that you need to. Not all the time, not every couple months. They shouldn't be changed that frequently, because you need to have a basis for your ordinances and some kind of predictability there, but as often as you need to do them.
Yeah, and if you have a major retailer that was an anchor in a shopping center leave, if you have a major employer leave, that creates opportunity. And so it creates a visioning opportunity to engage community and figure out, what do we want here?
Yeah, thank you. Wendy had asked if a EC member can legally also serve on the zoning board.
Oh, that's a good question. Yes. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to back that up by saying legally. But yeah, I'm not aware of any provisions that prohibit it. The issue is that when an environmental commission is established by ordinance with statutory reference, there's a requirement to have a shared member with the planning board. And there's nothing to prohibit you from having multiple shared members or from having a member on the zoning board. Ed, did I say something wrong? You look nervous for a second.
No, I'm just trying to keep my cat from making a cameo.
Oh. That's okay. We like cameos.
All right, I have another question. What does it mean to bifurcate an application? And is this a sneaky developer strategy?
I'm not sure what they mean by bifurcate an application. Ed, do you have an idea?
Yeah, it's and I'm sure someone is going to correct me here, but it's usually if you go for a preliminary and final at the same time, you can do a preliminary, get approval, and then go back for a final.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. As somebody who has served on land use boards, I actually prefer when they split it between a preliminary and a final, because I don't want to give all the approvals at once. You go ahead and do the preliminary, and then let's get more detail on the plan. And then we'll come back in and talk about the final later. But if I'm giving you preliminary and final at once, it's out of my hands, I never see it again. If it's something small, it's not a big deal. But if it's a big development, let's do preliminary, let's get some more information in, and then you come back for final. It might be soil borings that you need for stormwater management to see drainage, or something else. It might be investigation to see if there's any soil contamination, but that's my preference, is to bifurcate. I don't know if you've got an opinion on that, Ed.
No, I agree with you. I just, and this again, speaking just anecdotally, I don't see a lot of bifurcated ones.
Yeah, I don't know.
Rarely. It's almost always preliminary and final together.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Mimi had asked if we have a list of the key new areas that should be included in updating a master plan for like this year, if you were doing it. I know. Ed mentioned a few
Yeah,
important.
so I was literally just reading from the state statutes uh from the chapter law. So that's available online. I'm sure it's somewhere easily accessible. And it enumerates them all, but in terms of a cheat sheet, I'm not sure if there's a handy one yet. I don't remember if it was the Department of Community Affairs or DEP that was developing one. I know that there was.
Yeah, the listing is also, I believe, in the ANJAC Environmental Commissioner's Handbook. I don't know if we can get a link to that in the chat or not while we're doing live
can.
here.
Absolutely.
But that, that handbook is only as good as the last time we updated it, which has been a few years now, but it'll give you the statutory reference that Google will send you right to, or you can ask Chat GPT and take your chances there, see what it asks you. I would say the big one to pay attention to that most municipalities don't have yet. Oh, thank you for putting the link to the ANJAC Commissioner's Handbook in the chat, that most municipalities have not addressed yet at this point in time is the municipal climate hazard assessment. Municipalities are still figuring that out, and we're doing our best to figure out how to provide resources to municipalities in figuring that out, because it's a vulnerability assessment looking at the current and future impacts of the climate crisis on your roads and other infrastructure, on communities in low-lying areas, which are often low-income Black and Brown communities. And so how you're going to plan for that moving forward.
Terrific. Thank you, Jen and Ed. We have one more question from Davina about considering that there are hazardous sites and Superfund sites in New Jersey. How do you plan around those, and what should you be doing if your municipality has some, which they probably do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, we've got a lot of contaminated sites here in New Jersey. I've got a slide that I didn't use today that talks about we're one of the original 13 colonies. So we've got a lot of old stuff, and we've got some toxic remnants of that stuff as well. So what you want to do is have an idea, and I would include this if you think you have many in your municipality. I would include it in your natural resources inventory just as an informative section of which Superfunds and brownfield sites you have. NJ GeoWeb, which is the DEP website, as well as NJ Map, which is a project. We sometimes call it Blueprint or NJ Blueprint. It's a map of that Rowan University has put together, brings in that DEP data as well. So you can pull up and see what Superfund sites are in your municipality and what brownfields are. Just because you have a Superfund or a brownfield doesn't mean you can't do anything with it. The type of contamination that's on that land will define what can or cannot be done with that land. We do not put schools, we do not put residential on highly contaminated areas, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't put warehousing, you couldn't put storage areas, you couldn't use that area for a solar field. There are other things that can be done with those properties. Ed, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think you covered all of it, Jen.
Awesome. All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Otherwise, we've got people out of here at a reasonable time.
Actually, Jen, I do have one comment. I just want to follow up for everyone on the call. You made a comment in your presentation talking about getting in front of something. And I think that is, if we were to have one takeaway from all of this, from the master plans, from the zoning, all of it is get in front of it. If there's an application in your town that's in front of the planning board that you don't like, and you want to oppose it, that's good luck. But the time to address these things is when we're creating our ordinances and when we're creating our master plans, to make sure that the types of detrimental developments that we sometimes see never make it to that point in the process. So get in front of it, be involved, make sure that you're talking to your planning board about what you want to see in your master plans, and make sure that you are setting up your town for success, so that you're not fighting something at the last minute when all of the ordinances are saying this is fine, and you're just the lone voice out there saying, but it's not.
Yeah. Your hands are tied behind your back by the time an application comes in, because the applicant has generally tried to meet most of the zoning requirements and most of the land use requirements. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing many of you this evening. Thank you so much, Ed, for being with us today. We appreciate it, and for everything you do for ANJAC. I'll
Glad
see
to be
the
here.
staff in a few hours as well. Tonight, we're doing site plan applications. We have Dr. Chris Abrupta from Rutgers University. He's not just a PhD, but he's a PE. So he's going to help us understand how the heck do you review a site plan application and a stormwater plan. We're going to walk through that in some detail for you to try to demystify that project. All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Take care. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.